Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Henna Hundal, and today we're bringing you an interview with the President of Pakistan, His Excellency Dr. Arif Alvi. President Alvi, a dentist by training, shifted toward politics early in his career and is now leading Pakistan alongside Prime Minister Imran Khan during a time of critical geopolitical, economic, and COVID-19 challenges. This interview will elicit President Alvi's opinions on these issues, including his views on the recent developments in Afghanistan and what he believes the future of U.S. Pakistan diplomatic relations should look like. During this interview, I'll be joined by guest hosts Qaiser Nawab and Giovanna Mingarelli, who will ask the President for his perspectives on youth and technology-focused policies. As always, the opinions conveyed in this broadcast belong to our guest. President Alvi joins us now.
Thank you. Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. President. So Pakistan is still grappling with COVID-19 cases, and I'm wondering, given your professional experience in the medical field, what steps do you think could be taken to encourage greater vaccination rates in Pakistan right now?
I think Pakistan has been not only lucky, Pakistan has handled the COVID situation much better than a lot of countries in the world, especially those in our region, because we are probably geographically, race-wise, weather-wise, we are very similar to India. There was total chaos on the Indian side. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. There's no estimate regarding that. But Pakistan has had a very successful COVID strategy. For example, we've not gone beyond 6,800 COVID patients in a day, not new diagnosis in a day, 6,800 for a population which is about 220 million as far as the last statistics are concerned. We made sure, the Prime Minister made the first such initiative in the world when he said that we will not go into a total lockdown because our people need money to survive. There will be widespread hunger if we shut the country down totally. So once that dictation had taken place, our data analyzers, and we went into a technical situation where we started only smart lockdowns. Pakistan had even today it is 3,200 new cases in a day. There is extensive testing. So Pakistan has managed it very well. Our hospitals were never overburdened. Not a single day the hospitals were overburdened. We came close to about 70 to 80% in the initial days regarding ventilators or hospital beds. But in the early days that happened. But since then, Pakistan has not even filled up 50% of its facilities as far as COVID patients are concerned. So we are handling them well. Plus the fact that basically this country is a very philanthropic country. People put their hands in their pockets, took out money, handled the people who are jobless, and the government itself paid out 12,000 rupees to the lowest sector of the population to handle COVID situations. Our vaccinations are almost 70 million done, out of which 50 million have had double doses. So I think we are vaccinating daily about more than 1.2 million people daily. There has been resistance, but Pakistan has adopted a policy that travel will be restricted to people who are not vaccinated. In the government sector, teachers have to be vaccinated to continue their jobs. All government officers had to be vaccinated, and probably they're already done. Different restrictions will come up. The ability to the telephone SIMs will be blocked if people do not get vaccinated after 1 or 2 warnings. So Pakistan and the people have reacted very well. We kept our mosques open. We went through all our routines. The mosques in the world were closed, but with SOPs, we kept our mosques open. So it's a remarkable thing which Pakistan has done. Compared to its population, it has managed it well, but we continue to take precautions. We continue to advertise precautions. We continue with our smart lockdown policies where we feel that the possible rate would be higher. So we continue with those policies. So I'm very satisfied.
So I want to follow up on that, Mr. President. Given the recent geopolitical changes in South Asia that are contributing to increased migration into Pakistan, Do you see that affecting the COVID-19 vaccination efforts at all? And if so, how do you plan to extend COVID-19 resources more broadly?
Pakistan has been a country which has given refuge to about 3.5 to 4 million refugees since past 4 decades. While different countries made different determinations, Pakistan made sure that everybody in Pakistan goes towards vaccinations. We did not discriminate in any manner against a foreign citizen or a refugee or any other citizen in Pakistan. So it is always a situation where, luckily, what has happened in Afghanistan, we were afraid that it will be a lot of violence in transfer of power. That violence did not take place, and I think there is not today. There is no influx of refugees right now, and I don't think there would be any. But in the same situation, I would like to say that the Western governments should unblock their resources, should help Afghanistan transition, because in every such struggle there are mediocre elements and extreme elements. If the world starves them of food and starves them of medical aid and starves them of funds, what we will see is the extremist element in such organizations creates more bitterness and leads to more violence. So the world is warned today that you have to handle this in a very unique way. They have shown great responsibility until now. There's not been any report of extensive violence at all. So I think situation is in a flux. But Pakistan has to be careful if there is an influx. We don't know yet whether there will be an influx of refugees, but Pakistan will be careful as far as COVID is concerned.
Mm-hmm. And so just to follow up on that, Mr. President, what do you believe diplomatic relations will look like between Afghanistan and Pakistan in this new era?
I think it should be friendly, like with all neighbors. They have given assurance to China. They've given assurance in the Doha Accord to the U.S. And they have given assurance to Pakistan that their territory will not be used for creating violence or terror in neighboring countries, which is very important for us, because we believe that TTP residing in Afghanistan, and they know it and they've said it, that we've asked TTP not to create violence. They can stay as refugees in Afghanistan, but we will not allow them to create violence. Number one. Number two, they have been cognizant of the fact that India has used Afghan territory against Pakistan. Yadav, a person who's in arrest in Pakistan, was an Indian officer, and they used Afghanistan territory to create violence in Balochistan against CPECs, against Chinese. There are a number of violent incidents which happened in Lahore and Karachi, which are totally related to, and we've given a dossier to the world. Even recently, our foreign minister 3 days ago presented another dossier where India is involved directly and through Afghanistan. So therefore, we expect the new Afghan government to make sure that this doesn't happen, and it seems they will not allow that to happen anymore.
So just to follow up on that, Mr. President, what do you envision as the role of Pakistan in the region's geopolitics, given all the recent changes?
I think the role of Pakistan is very important. Pakistan is the biggest sufferer of this this war against terror in Afghanistan. And 20 years ago, Prime Minister Imran Khan made a press statement, and I was there in Islamabad when Kabul was attacked, and he said this is not the way to go about it. So the world has learnt about this in 20 years after having spent at least $2.3 trillion and creating tremendous loss of lives. So they should have heard what Pakistan was saying. They should still hear what Pakistan is saying, because in this situation, some countries are trying to make Pakistan a scapegoat. When $2.3 trillion of money, all NATO most sophisticated weapons could not handle Afghanistan, do they really believe that Pakistan created a situation where there will be a loss to NATO and they had to withdraw? It's impossible. It's unworthy of the Western intellect to think like that. But presently, scapegoating is going on. We are being appreciated for the fact that we helped people from Afghanistan to leave, foreign personnel, etc., etc. We help in evacuation of personnel. We helped in humanitarian aid. every day some aircraft from Pakistan, including PIA, is going to help in humanitarian aid. We help humanitarian evacuation. But the most important thing is that the government should be given, the Taliban government should be given time rather than squeeze them right now. Because as you squeeze the moderate element in the Taliban, the extreme element will come forward, and there will be increased chance of infighting or situation in Afghanistan getting worse.
Mr. President, you mentioned NATO. Do you have a message you would like to deliver to the U.S. regarding the future of Pakistan-U.S. relations?
I think Pakistan-U.S. relation has been good over a long period of time. Since the 60s, we were together in the CETO, CENTO pacts, etc., etc. There has been tremendous cooperation. So we look forward to a good relationship. As long as we are, and I believe we should not be made a scapegoat as far as Afghanistan situation is concerned. There was poor advice given to the US. There was poor analysis done by the US on the failure of the Afghan government. The best thing the Afghan government could do was to say that it is not our failure, it is a failure because Pakistan is interfering. And that government ran away so fast that you can imagine. There are estimates within the US of the corruption, tremendous corruption of that government. All their money was going into corrupt hands. So I believe as the time passes, and I hope there is rationality prevailing in the US Congress and in the Senate, they will realize that the blame game going on as far as Pakistan is concerned is not correct. Pakistan was left holding the embers of the war, the Soviet war in Afghanistan. It was the war against the Soviets was encouraged by the US. We went along because we thought that Afghanistan needed to be liberated. But as soon as the Soviets left, we were left holding the whole baggage. And again, it seems so. And therefore, I request the US people that it is very important to take Afghanistan out of its misery on a humanitarian level. Understand the fact that foreign ideas cannot be prescribed or forced onto a people. They may be right. The ideas may be right, but they cannot be forced into it. For example, women education. I've heard responsible statements coming out from the Taliban that they will continue with women higher education also, but they would like to segregate the schools or divide the classes with curtains or encourage women teachers. That is the culture. So if the encouraging statements are being delivered, don't wait for performance because they don't have the money to perform and show it. To release the money, allow them to come out and stabilize the government. This is the best message I can give you. This is important for world peace. Let this Afghanistan not be a football between, in the future, new power rivalry which may be emerging in the world. Pakistan stands to gain tremendously. This region stands to gain tremendously. Central Asian states stands to gain commercially with trade coming and flowing through Afghanistan through Gwadar. That's the shortest route for rail, for transport, for communication, for energy. In fact, the Tapi pipeline, Turkmenistan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and India pipeline is something which has been pushed by the US government. I think this is a tremendous project. So I think in the rebuilding of Afghanistan, an attitude similar to what was in the Marshall Plan in Europe has to be adopted.
Mr. President, I want to return to a few healthcare-focused questions. You've been vocal about the issue of antibiotic resistance and how increased reliance on antibiotics could pose serious challenges for public health infrastructure. Can you talk more about this issue in the Pakistani context and what you believe is at stake here?
I think this is an important situation which we have on our desk, and we have been trying to promote this issue in our education. When the doctors are getting educated in the fact that antibiotics, we are looking forward to controlling the dispensing of antibiotics in the chemist shops. We want prescription related acknowledged through IT in a manner where bad prescription should not, the spurious prescription should not be done of antibiotics which is increasing antibiotic resistance. Even in the US, there is strong data which is showing that more than 50% of the antibiotics are not necessary, but because there is patient pressure, because the doctors feel that some coverage needs to be done. So that is happening in the US, must be happening more in Pakistan, and that is why we are very concerned about it. And we should be educating our physicians as well as controlling the areas where antibiotics are dispensed. Today in Pakistan, the antibiotics are freely available, which we need to control.
And one other issue regarding healthcare, you've been an advocate for establishing greater telemedicine infrastructure in Pakistan, which became especially relevant during COVID-19. Can you talk more about how you see the country going about this effort, especially given the disparate access to Wi-Fi in rural regions?
I believe, being a dentist myself, I've lived a life where I've talked about the fact that prevention can handle a lot of diseases and problems. In dentistry, for example, prevention can handle more than 95% of the problems which can emerge. Pakistan, as one of the developing countries, cannot afford curative treatments in all diseases. Pakistan needs to improve public hygiene, sanitation, clean water, and the fact that washing of hands can prevent spreading of cholera and other diseases. In fact, before COVID, the presidency organized a major movement because the Muslims pray 5 times a day and they wash their hands. So I wanted the ulama, which are the priests in Pakistan, in the mosque, that when people are doing ablution 5 times a day, they should be asked to wash their hands to prevent communicable diseases. But that was a year before COVID. So our effort in this direction has been going on. Number 2, as far as prevention is concerned, we are asked, for example, breast cancer. In October, my wife leads the movement making women aware of breast cancer. What is happening in Pakistan because of the taboo, women do not, in the early stages, they do not come in for diagnosis and treatment. Therefore, mortality related to breast cancer is about 50% in Pakistan, whereas in the developed world is about 98%. Mortality is only 2%. So we are working in that area. We are working on hepatitis, because hepatitis is going through needles. And we have ensured the fact in Pakistan by law that one single-use syringes, multiple-use syringes are banned. Single-use syringes are being promoted. We are working on population management, and I had a meeting today in the morning regarding manufacturing of IUD devices and contraceptives in Pakistan, because we believe, we have statistics that 8 million unwanted pregnancies happen every year in Pakistan. 8 million pregnancies happen in Pakistan every year, out of which 4 million are unwanted. Those unwanted pregnancies are the lowest hanging fruit, where if contraceptives are available, we may be able to prevent that. So we have taken the mosque, because mosque in Pakistan is a major social center also. So in our health prevention, in our communication as far as COVID was concerned, in our communication regarding social issues are concerned, we are giving great importance to the fact that people believe the priests and the ulama, and therefore the mosque have a good role. Our media has played a very positive role as far as prevention is concerned, and in October we will see again that the media will be helping us in breast cancer prevention. So it's a very comprehensive strategy. Now, you asked about telemedicine. It's a situation very dear to me, and I addressed the parliament only 3 days ago, and I talked about telemedicine. And my concept of telemedicine is a little more grassroots. I believe that any poor woman whose husband is a laborer, for example, if she has a stomachache or a headache, and the husband comes home late at night after a whole day's grueling work, and she tells the husband, it is a possibility that they say, let's wait for it until tomorrow. Tomorrow again, it can get neglected. So at least the poor woman or a poor man in Pakistan should be able to make a call to a health center, to a doctor, to the lady health worker, and get some guidance as to the urgency of the situation. So that's the first step as far as I'm concerned in telemedicine. So I think it costs much less, than actual physical visit of the patient. She will get a taxi. As soon as a person gets ill in Pakistan or in the US, they all of a sudden a meter starts rolling like a taxi meter. Everybody is worried that I've got come to the hospital. What will be the cost? So therefore, I have great hope. We are working on it. We had a meeting a few days ago on telemedicine, and we have passed a law to encourage this kind of service. And I think we will make tremendous, we'll have a tremendous progress in this area in the near future.
Mr. President, I'm going to bring Qaiser Nawab into the conversation now. Qaiser is a young Pakistani leader working globally for the Sustainable Development Goals and is the founder of the COVID-19 Youth Task Force, which is convening a broad array of stakeholders to control COVID-19 globally. Qaiser is going to ask you a few questions now about youth-oriented policies.
Thank you, Henna, and good afternoon, Excellency. My question is regarding the young population, which constitutes about 65% of the population of Pakistan. What do you see is both the economic challenges and opportunities for Pakistan in the near future?
This is the youth bulge. And if the youth bulge does not get opportunities and Pakistan does not progress, we will have an old people's bulge, which will be too expensive for society, which some countries are already seeing it. Even developed countries find it very expensive that if the bulge of the population is in the older sector, so what happens to productivity in the Middle Ages? So therefore, Pakistan has lost in the previous decades on one issue. We did not have comprehensive total population education. So therefore, what we are doing is ensuring the fact that people but still didn't go to school, but leave that aside for a moment. The elders, so say in 19 plus year, 20 plus year, 25 plus generation which we have, who are not fully educated or who are not educated, we are imparting a skill-based training program to them. There are hundreds of skills which are being imparted through Kamyab Jawan program, Hunar Mand program, which is also called, which is a skilled person, translated into English, a skilled person program. And I believe that we have to cater for, if there is no skill with a person, he just does raw labor. And I talked about it in the parliament a few days ago. So if from the raw labor, we want to improve his skills to a certain level where he's able to improve his livelihood and he's also able to contribute to the economy of the country. So that is what we are doing for the unskilled labor. The second thing which we are doing is trying to ensure that 100% population get admitted to schools. Today, we believe that a large percentage of population is not going to schools. We want to encourage women education particularly. And we have a lot of programs where we are trying to ensure the fact that there's no dropout among the women in Pakistan. We will also probably, let me make you aware if you're not, that in the professional education fields like dentistry, engineering, medicine, etc., there are more women in Pakistan. In fact, in medicine, there are 80% women and only 20% male people in who will become doctors and have become doctors in the past and will become doctors in the future. We have to ensure that these women develop their own families as they please, but at the same time they don't drop out of the economy also. So telemedicine, for example, is an opportunity where a woman can stay home, work with the family also, but work outside as well. Pakistan believes in a family tradition, not necessarily that the women have to stay home, but the fact that the children need parental attention. So therefore, we need to encourage women participation in the economy too. What we are doing, the Kamyab Jawan program is a loan-giving SME, small and medium enterprises loan-giving agency, which disbursed about 20 billion rupees worth of money last year. And this year, the government has put in 100 billion rupees for them to disburse. These are loans not related to collateral. These are loans for young people from 20 to 35 or 40. And it is based on ideas and skills, and less not based on collateral. So the youth bulge in the IT sector, we are the presidential initiative of artificial intelligence is also trying to pick up students who are after 10 years education or 12 years education, trying to teach them simple skills of writing software programs, etc. And we almost had a 50% increase in our software exports, and the productivity in the software line is increasing. So there are a number of areas where all of a sudden this government is trying to get into the fast running train of the IT, which is the fourth industrial revolution. We are working in that area. For women loans also, the banks are giving out loans at much lesser interest rate compared to commercial loans. And we need to hold women's hands. We were discussing this today in the morning in the meeting, that the loans are available, but the women are not there. So we are encouraging NGOs to come forward to guide women. It's very difficult for a simple woman, a housewife who wants to do business, to be able to develop a feasibility study. So sample feasibility studies, the banks, the effort of the banks, the effort of the politicians, we are exposing the universities to these programs also. So for the youth bulge, we are very involved in trying to improve our youth productivity in Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Back to you, Henna.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to now bring in Giovanna Mingarelli into the conversation. Giovanna is a Canadian technology entrepreneur who serves on the advisory board of Women in Cloud, which is a UN women-supported organization that is empowering women-led STEM companies. Giovanna is going to ask you a few questions now about women in technology in Pakistan.
Thank you, Henna, and hello, Mr. President. You've pioneered the use of technology for greater electoral progress during your political career, where you introduced social media platforms to politics in Pakistan. You were, for example, instrumental in holding inter-party elections in 2012 and 2013 that enabled millions of party members to digitally participate in the electoral process. One of your projects was enabling the digital identification of voters and voting of overseas Pakistanis. Can you please tell us more about that and how you believe digital identification will support Pakistan's growth plans?
I think there is unanimity in the world that digitization of an economy increases our GDP, any GDP, by 1 or 2%, number one. Number two, involvement of women in the productive cycle in the economy further increases our gross domestic product and a gross national product. Having said that, we need to empower our women. One of the things is through education. The other is, if they're less educated, to provide some loans for small situations like for small shops or for able to stitch garments or fashion houses of some sort, etc. to do that. The third thing is that in Pakistan, sometimes woman inheritance becomes an issue. So the religion of Islam has ensured that woman inheritance is there since 1400 years. It's the cultures of different countries. In fact, Europe did not come into woman inheritance recognizing that until the early 20th century. But Islam had that since 1400 years ago. So therefore, we had the law, but not being implemented because of cultural traditions that woman is asked to gift it to her brother, etc. So in 2020, we enacted the Woman Property Rights Law. So that ensures inheritance. Number two, it also ensures the fact that if somebody is an undue usurper of her property or sitting on that property, it creates shortcuts as far as women are concerned to ease that situation. The third issue which you mentioned, which actually your main issue which you questioned about, is the possibility of electronic voting, both inside Pakistan and outside Pakistan. Let me give you some idea. When I pushed this issue, and I've been pushing this issue in the courts of law in the parliament since 2010, and my case came to hearing in the Supreme Court in 2018, and I in the Supreme Court, somebody mentioned the fact that internet voting can be hacked. And I said, yes, it can be hacked. Similar to the fact that people take planes and the plane can crash. But what are the percentage chances of hacking? And I took out my phone and told the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and asked him, do you have any idea of the amount of transactions that take place digitally in the world today? And that was 2018. And he said, maybe a few $1 billion. And I said, no, $5 trillion are moved on digital platforms throughout the world in a day. So I've been trying to convince the opposition and move the people of Pakistan towards the ability of digital voting. The digital voting requires 3 or 4 steps. Number one, the fact that a person has some digital ability to do it. For example, ability does not mean his knowledge or his education, but the fact that he has a smartphone. Because of lack of smartphone, we cannot deprive the rest of those who have a smartphone. Number one, that was a discussion which took place. Number two is that some agency would be able to make sure that I'm the person who has this smartphone and this is my identity. That is easily done in Pakistan today because NADRA has information and the banks call, somebody who calls the bank that I want to move my funds from here to there, the bank asks him specific questions regarding his family or his broader family or etc., which not everybody would know. For example, nobody would know about my cousins, names of my cousins. So those questions are asked and the person is put through in digital banking. So the same thing we want to have in internet voting. Third is the ability to the vote not to be traceable. So there can be algorithmic mixing of the votes, but the ability to audit that also is possible, that the keys to this algorithmic mixing can be given to 3 or 4 people, maybe the Supreme Court, Chief Justice of Pakistan, and maybe to the Chief Election Commissioner, that when all the 2 keys are put in, only then this can be unraveled for an audit, which will not expose people's votes, but will at least expose it for the audit. So I think the software package needs to be developed, and in fact, but people in Pakistan need to be convinced that this will not lead to any hacking. And right now, for electronic voting, I have figures, for example, very important figures. For example, in Philippines, when electronic voting machines were used, when they were not used, there was 35% trust in the voting system. More than 100 people died, presiding officers died in 2007, and there were more than 1,000 petitions. So I will trace this to the next election. Then the first election they had on electronic voting and technology in voting, the confidence went up from 35% to 70%. There were only 2 people killed. And the election petitions from 1,000 plus came down to 45 or 49. By the 3rd or 4th election, the confidence in the election process went to 89%. Nobody was killed, and only 11 petitions came up. So this is a public situation where we have to convince the people of Pakistan that this is a tried and tested situation. People say, why didn't the Western countries adopt that? Because they have securer systems. Traditionally, they have been more democratic. So it's very difficult to usurp those systems. But in fact, Mr. Trump challenged that system also. So the US will also have to go to some kind of internet voting or technology in the voting process.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, and Henna, back to you.
And this concludes the interview with the President of Pakistan, Dr. Arif Alvi. I'm Henna Hundal, and I thank you for listening.